where powerful stories of betrayal, justice, and redemption come to life. Follow along as a father figure shares gripping tales filled with wisdom, emotion, and unexpected twists. Sit back and experience revenge told with calm strength and unforgettable impact.
My daughter laughed. My father-in-law built everything by himself, unlike you. I replied. Then I'll stop paying your bills. Let him bankroll your life. She went silent, eyes wide, and whispered, Wait, what bills? I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Albert, and at 67 years old, I thought I had heard every cruel thing a person could say. I was wrong. It was a Sunday afternoon in March, one of those rare warm days when spring decides to show its face early. The kind of day Margaret used to love, when she would open all the windows and let the fresh air chase away the staleness of winter. I was sitting at my daughter Lillian's dining room table, surrounded by marble countertops and gleaming appliances that cost more than I made in 6 months, watching my grandchildren Emma and James play with toys that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. The house always made me feel small. Everything was oversized and expensive, from the crystal chandelier hanging above us to the leather furniture that squeaked when you moved. It smelled like expensive candles and cleaning products, nothing like the warm scent of home-cooked meals and lived-in comfort that Margaret had created in our little house all those years ago. Dad, you really should think about doing something with your life, Lillian said, her voice carrying that particular tone she had developed since marrying Richard. Sharp, dismissive, like she was speaking to a child who couldn't quite grasp simple concepts. She was cutting into her perfectly prepared roast, each slice precise and deliberate. I mean, you're only 67, Harold is 68, and he's still building houses, expanding his business every year. Harold, Richard's father, sat across from me with that smile he always wore when someone brought up his success. His wife, Victoria, nodded approvingly, dabbing at her lips with a cloth napkin that probably cost more than my entire dinner service. That's right, Harold said, leaning back in his chair. Just last month I bought another 20 acres for development. Can't slow down, you know. The world doesn't wait for anyone. I took a bite of my food, chewing slowly. The roast was perfect, expensive, but it tasted like nothing. Everything in this house was like that, beautiful on the surface, empty underneath. Your father has always been different, Victoria chimed in, her voice syrupy with false sympathy. Some people are just more relaxed about achievement. Relaxed about achievement. That stung more than it should have. I thought about the calluses on my hands from 43 years of maintenance work, the ache in my back from crawling under sinks and fixing broken heating systems, the nights I worked a second job stocking shelves just to make ends meet after Margaret died. Dad's always been lazy compared to Richard's family, Lillian continued, and my fork stopped halfway to my mouth. I mean, Harold built his entire empire from nothing. He owns 3 companies now, and Dad just fixed things for other people his whole life. Emma, my 8-year-old granddaughter, looked up from her plate with curious eyes. Grandpa Albert, why didn't you build companies like Grandpa Harold? The innocence in her question made it hurt worse. These children were learning to see me as the lesser grandfather, the one who hadn't achieved anything worth talking about. James, only 6, nodded along with his sister, already absorbing the lesson being taught at this table. Some people just don't have that drive, Richard said, cutting into his meat with unnecessary force. It takes a special kind of person to build something from nothing. I set my fork down and looked around the table. 9 people, including myself, and I felt more alone than I had since Margaret's funeral. The conversation continued around me, with Harold describing his latest business acquisition and Victoria discussing their upcoming trip to Europe. Lillian hung on every word, her eyes bright with admiration for the life she had married into. Dad, you could learn something from Harold, Lillian said, turning her attention back to me. Maybe it's not too late to start something. Harold always says it's never too late to stop being lazy and start achieving something meaningful. There it was again. Lazy. The word settled in my chest like a stone. I thought about the envelope I'd hidden in my truck, the one containing copies of 8 years' worth of bank statements, $3,200 every month for her mortgage, $450 for her insurance, $600 for utilities, $2,800 for the children's private school, $700 for her car payments, $7,750 every month for 8 years, $93,000 every year, $744,000 total. The money I had saved for Margaret and my retirement, the money from selling our dream house after she died, the money from her life insurance that was supposed to help me through my golden years, all of it gone, flowing silently into the life Lillian thought Richard's family was providing for her. "You know what, Lillian?" I said quietly, my voice steady despite the tremor I felt inside. The table went silent. Even Emma and James stopped eating to look at me. "You're absolutely right about Harold being successful." Harold's chest puffed up with pride. Victoria smiled that condescending smile. Richard nodded approvingly. Lillian looked pleased that I was finally agreeing with her. "He's built an empire," I continued, folding my napkin and placing it beside my plate. "He's achieved so much. He's clearly the better provider in this family." "Dad, I'm glad you're finally seeing that," Lillian said, her voice softer now, like she thought she had gotten through to me. I stood up slowly, feeling every one of my 67 years in my joints. "So I'm sure Harold won't mind taking over the $3,200 I pay for your mortgage every month." The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, the hum of the expensive refrigerator, the sound of my own heartbeat in my ears. Lillian's fork clattered to her plate. "What did you say?" "The mortgage, sweetheart. The one I've been paying for 8 years. Harold can take care of it now, along with your insurance, utilities, the children's school tuition, and your car payment." The color drained from Lillian's face. Richard straightened in his chair, his confident expression flickering for just a moment. Harold and Victoria exchanged glances, their smugness faltering. "Dad, what are you talking about?" Lillian's voice was barely above a whisper. I reached for my jacket, hanging on the back of my chair. "I'm talking about the $7,750 I send to various companies every month to keep your life exactly as comfortable as it is right now." Lillian stood up so fast her chair scraped against the hardwood floor. "That's impossible. Richard handles all the bills. The mortgage comes out of our account." I looked at Richard, whose face had gone pale beneath his expensive tan. "Does it, son?" For the first time since I had known him, Richard seemed speechless. He opened his mouth, closed it, then looked away. "What bills, Dad?" Lillian asked, her voice shaking now. "What bills are you talking about?" I pulled on my jacket, taking my time with each button. Margaret had given me this jacket for Christmas 15 years ago. It was worn at the elbows now, but it was real, honest, earned through years of hard work and sacrifice. "All of them," I said simply. "Every single one that keeps this house running and your children in their fancy school." I walked toward the door, leaving behind the shocked silence and the half-eaten expensive meal. At the threshold, I turned back one last time. Emma and James stared at me with wide, confused eyes. Lillian stood frozen beside her chair, one hand gripping the table for support. Richard looked like a man watching his carefully constructed world begin to crack. "Harold," I said, nodding respectfully toward the man who had just spent an hour explaining why he was superior to me in every way. "I'm sure a successful businessman like yourself won't have any trouble picking up where a lazy man like me left off." I walked to my old pickup truck, got in, and drove away. In my rearview mirror, I could see the house growing smaller, but for the first time in 8 years, I felt like I was finally getting bigger. The phone started ringing before I even got home. I turned it off and drove in blessed silence, thinking about Margaret and wondering what she would say about what I had just done. I thought she might be proud. For the first time in a long time, I was standing up for myself, But as I pulled into my small apartment complex, I knew this was only the beginning. Tomorrow, Lillian would start digging, and she was going to discover just how deep the hole of her ignorance really went. I knew Lillian would call. What I didn't expect was for it to happen at 5:30 in the morning. The phone's shrill ring cut through the quiet of my small apartment like a knife. I had been lying awake since 4, staring at the ceiling and thinking about Margaret's recipe box, sitting on my kitchen counter. She used to make Sunday dinners that filled our little house with warmth and laughter. Nothing like the cold perfection of yesterday's meal. "Dad, what did you mean?" Lillian's voice was tight, strained like she had been crying. "About the bills." "What did you mean about the bills?" I sat up slowly, my back protesting after a restless night. Through my bedroom window I could see Mrs. Chen in the apartment across the courtyard, already tending to her small garden. She waved when she saw me, and I waved back. Simple kindness. I had forgotten how good that felt. "Good morning to you too, sweetheart." "Don't give me that," she snapped, then caught herself. "Please, Dad, just tell me what you meant. Richard is acting strange and won't give me straight answers. I've been up all night trying to understand what you said." I walked to the kitchen and put the coffee on. The morning ritual Margaret and I had shared for 26 years before cancer took her away. The familiar sounds of water heating and coffee brewing were comforting in a way Lillian's marble and granite palace could never be. "What did Richard tell you when you asked him about it?" A long pause. "He said you were confused, that you're getting old and maybe your memory isn't what it used to be." I almost laughed. Richard was smooth, I had to give him that. "My memory is fine, Lillian. Crystal clear, actually." "Then explain it to me, please." I could hear desperation creeping into her voice, and despite everything, it tugged at my heart. She was still my little girl, the one who used to crawl into bed with Margaret and me during thunderstorms, the one who insisted on helping me fix things around the house even though she was too small to hold the tools properly. "Your mortgage payment is $3,200 a month," I said quietly. "It comes out of an account I set up 8 years ago. The payment is automatic, every 15th of the month." "That's impossible. Richard showed me our bank statements. Our mortgage comes out of our joint account." "Check your statements again, sweetheart. Really check them. Look at the dates, the amounts." I heard papers rustling in the background, drawers opening and closing. She was in Richard's office, I realized. The place he had told her she didn't need to worry about because he handled all the complicated financial stuff. "Dad, I'm looking at our mortgage statements right now. They show payments coming from our account every month." "What's the account number on the statements?" More rustling papers. A long silence, then in a voice barely above a whisper, "I don't understand. This isn't our account number." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of 8 years of deception settling between us like a mountain. "Keep looking, Lillian. Check the property insurance, the utilities, the children's school payments." The silence stretched on for several minutes. I could hear her breathing getting faster, more shallow. Then she started making small sounds like someone trying not to cry. "Dad?" she whispered finally. "None of these account numbers match our bank account." "No, they don't." "But if you're paying all of this—" Her voice trailed off. I could almost hear her mind working, putting together pieces of a puzzle that Richard had spent years keeping her from seeing. "What else am I paying for, you mean?" "How much?" The words came out broken, barely audible. "How much are you paying?" I sat down at my small kitchen table, the one Margaret and I had bought second-hand 40 years ago. It was scarred and worn, but it was real. It had hosted countless meals, homework sessions, late-night conversations. It had been the center of our actual family life. $7,750 a month. The phone went silent except for Lillian's ragged breathing. "That's $93,000 a year, sweetheart. For 8 years. A sound escaped her that was part sob, part moan. $744,000. "You were always good at math." Oh my God, Dad, I had no idea. Richard handles everything. He said the payments were automatic from his family's trust fund. He said I didn't need to worry about money because his parents set everything up when we got married." I thought about Harold's smug smile at dinner, his speeches about building empires and never slowing down. I thought about Victoria's condescending remarks about my relaxed attitude toward achievement. They knew. They had always known. Dad, where did you get that kind of money? This was the question I had been dreading. The one that would hurt her the most. Your mother's life insurance policy was for $150,000. You used Mom's insurance money? That was just the beginning. I took a deep breath, tasting the bitter truth I was about to serve. After your first divorce, when you were struggling with Emma and James, I sold our house. The house on Maple Street, the one where I grew up. Your mother and I bought that house when we were 25. She planted every flower in that garden, chose every paint color, planned every room renovation. It was our dream house, the place we thought we'd grow old together. I could hear her crying now, soft, hiccuping sobs that reminded me of the little girl she used to be. I sold it for $280,000. Use that money to set up the account that pays for your life. Dad, no, please tell me you didn't. I've been living in this apartment for 8 years, Lillian. 8 years in a place that smells like other people's cooking and has walls so thin I can hear my neighbors sneeze. I did it so you could live in a house that looks like something from a magazine. Why didn't you tell me? Her voice was raw, broken. Why didn't you tell me you were doing this? Because you were happy. You had found someone who loved you, who could give you the life you deserved. I thought Richard's family was taking care of you. I thought I was just helping until you got on your feet. 8 years, Dad. 8 years. I kept waiting for you to tell me you didn't need help anymore, that Richard was handling things, that his successful family was taking care of their son's wife and children. I heard a door slam in the background, heavy footsteps, Richard's voice asking who she was talking to. I have to go, Lillian whispered urgently. Richard's home from his morning run. He can't know I found out. Not yet. Lillian, wait. Dad, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for what I said yesterday. I didn't know. I never knew. The line went dead. I sat in my kitchen, surrounded by the modest furniture Margaret and I had accumulated over a lifetime of love and hard work. The morning sun streamed through windows that didn't have designer curtains, casting warm light on walls that didn't have expensive art. But for the first time in 8 years, this small space felt like home again. Because finally, someone knew the truth. My phone buzzed with a text message from Lillian. Don't stop the payments yet. I need time to figure this out. Richard can't know that I know. I stared at the message for a long time, understanding more than she realized. She wasn't just afraid of confronting Richard about the money. She was afraid of what else she might discover when she started digging into the carefully constructed lies that had become her life. And she was right to be afraid, because this was only the beginning of what Richard and his family had hidden from her. 3 days passed before Lillian called again. 3 days during which I went about my simple routine, morning coffee, reading the newspaper Mrs. Chen shared with me, tending to the small herb garden I had started on my fire escape. Margaret always said I had good hands for growing things. It was one of the few talents I had that didn't involve fixing what others had broken. When the phone finally rang, I was sitting in my worn recliner, the one Margaret and I had bought for our first apartment 45 years ago. It was ugly brown corduroy now, patched in several places, but it still held the shape of our bodies, the memory of countless evenings spent together. Dad, I need to see you. Lillian's voice was different now, hollow, like something fundamental had broken inside her. Can I come over? Of course, sweetheart. Richard thinks I'm grocery shopping. I told him I needed to get out of the house for a while. He keeps watching me, Dad, like he knows I know something. An hour later, she stood in my doorway looking like a stranger. Gone was the perfectly styled woman from Sunday dinner. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, her eyes were red and swollen, and she wore jeans and a simple sweater instead of the designer clothes I had grown accustomed to seeing her in. "This is where you live?" she asked, stepping into my small living room. Her voice held a note of shock I hadn't expected. "For 8 years now." She turned slowly, taking in the second-hand furniture, the small television on a wooden stand, the collection of Margaret's books still arranged on makeshift shelves. Her eyes stopped on the kitchen table, visible through the doorway. "Is that Mom's table? The one from Maple Street?" I couldn't leave it behind. It was the first piece of furniture we bought together. She walked over and ran her fingers along the scarred surface, tracing the ring stains from countless coffee cups and the deep gouge James had made with a toy car during one of their visits years ago. "I remember doing my homework here," she said softly. "Mom would sit right there and help me with my math problems. She was better at homework than I was. I could fix a broken pipe or rewire a lamp, but long division always stumped me." Lillian laughed, but it came out as more of a sob. She pulled out one of the chairs and sat down heavily, the same way she used to when she was little and had something important to tell us. "Dad, I've been going through everything, every bank statement, every bill, every document Richard has in his office." She pulled a manila folder from her purse and set it on the table. "I found all of it." I sat down across from her, the same place I'd occupied for thousands of meals with Margaret, hundreds of conversations with Lillian when she was growing up. "The mortgage isn't just in your name, Dad. The whole house is in your name. Richard and I don't own anything. We're essentially living in a house you bought for us." I had hoped she wouldn't dig that deep, but I knew Lillian. When she set her mind to something, she was thorough. It was a trait she had inherited from Margaret. "After your divorce from Michael, you were struggling. You had 2 babies, no job, and Michael wasn't paying child support like he was supposed to." I remember that time. It was awful. I was so scared I was going to lose Emma and James, that I wouldn't be able to provide for them. "You called me one night crying. It was 3 in the morning, and you said you had just put the babies to bed in an apartment with no heat because you couldn't pay the gas bill." Lillian closed her eyes, the memory clearly painful. I felt like such a failure. "You weren't a failure. You were 23 years old with 2 babies and an ex-husband who had disappeared. You were doing the best you could. But you fixed it. You always fixed everything." I looked down at my hands, folded on the table between us. These hands that had worked so many jobs, fixed so many problems, signed so many checks. "Your mother had a jewelry box. Do you remember it? The one with the ballerina that spun around when you opened it? She kept it on her dresser. Inside that box, she kept the pearl necklace her grandmother had given her. It was the only valuable thing she owned, passed down through 3 generations of women in her family." Lillian's face went pale. "Dad, please don't tell me you sold Mom's pearls." "Not just the pearls, everything. Her wedding ring, her grandmother's brooch, the silver tea set her mother left her, all of it." The sound Lillian made was barely human, a low keen of pain that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her chest. "That jewelry was supposed to go to you someday. Your mother talked about it all the time, how she would pass down her grandmother's pearls to her daughter, how you would wear them on your wedding day." "Oh God, Dad! Her wedding ring?" I kept one thing. I got up and walked to the small dresser by the window, opening the top drawer. Inside, wrapped in an old handkerchief, was a simple gold locket. "This was the first thing I ever gave your mother. I bought it with my first paycheck from the maintenance job at the hospital. It cost me $37, which was almost everything I had." I handed the locket to Lillian, and she opened it with trembling fingers. Inside were 2 tiny photographs, one of Margaret as a young woman, one of baby Lillian. "She wore this every day for 26 years, I said. "Even when she was sick, even during the chemotherapy when she lost her hair and felt like she wasn't beautiful anymore. She said as long as she wore this locket, she carried our love with her." Lillian was crying openly now, clutching the locket to her chest. "How much did you get for her jewelry?" $43,000. "And you used it all for me. For you and the children, for the security deposit on that first apartment you rented, for furniture, for groceries, for everything you needed to build a life for yourself." She looked around my small apartment again, seeing it with different eyes now. "And you moved here, to this place." "This place is fine, Lillian. It has everything I need. It's a 1-bedroom apartment in a building that smells like cabbage and has sirens going by all night long. The rent is $450 a month. That's important when you're sending $7,750 to someone else every month. She flinched at the number like it was a physical blow. I've been living in a house that costs $6,000 a month while you live in a place that costs $450. You've been living in the life I wanted to give you, the life your mother and I dreamed you would have. But not like this. Not at the cost of everything you and Mom built together. I reached across the table and took her hand. It was soft, manicured, unmarked by work or worry. So different from Margaret's hands, which had been strong and capable, scarred from years of gardening and cooking and caring for our family. Your mother would have made the same choice, sweetheart. She would have sold everything she owned to make sure you and the children were safe and happy. Would she have wanted you to live like this? Alone in this tiny place, giving up everything so I could play house in a mansion I didn't even know I didn't own? That was a harder question. Margaret had always been practical, sometimes more practical than I was. She might have drawn the line somewhere, set boundaries I had been too heartbroken and guilty to establish. I don't know, I admitted. But I know she would have wanted you to be happy. Lillian pulled her hand free and stood up abruptly, pacing to the window that looked out over the parking lot. Happy? God, Dad, I haven't been happy. I've been living a lie. What do you mean? Richard doesn't love me. His parents don't respect me. I'm just a prop in their perfect family picture, and the only reason they keep me around is because you're paying for everything. The bitterness in her voice cut me to the bone. That's not true. Isn't it? She turned to face me, and I saw something in her expression I had never seen before, a hardness, an anger that reminded me of Margaret when she was fighting the cancer, fierce and uncompromising. Richard married me 6 months after his trust fund was cut off for partying too much in college. His parents needed a respectable wife to rehabilitate his image, and I needed a father figure for Emma and James. You told me you loved each other. I thought I loved him, and maybe he thought he loved me too, but love doesn't involve lying about who's paying for your entire life. She sat back down, leaning forward with her elbows on the table. Dad, I need you to tell me everything. Not just about the money, but about Richard, about his family. What do you know that I don't? I looked at this woman, my daughter, and saw Margaret's determination in her eyes. She wasn't the fragile young mother who had called me crying 8 years ago. She wasn't the grateful bride who had thought she was marrying into security. She was someone I had never seen before, a woman who was ready to hear the truth no matter how much it hurt. Richard knew about the money from the beginning, I said quietly. His parents knew too. The last piece of her constructed world crumbled away, and I watched my daughter finally see her life for what it really was. The silence that followed my words was deafening. I watched as Lillian processed what I had just told her, her face cycling through disbelief, hurt, and finally settling on something I recognized from Margaret during her worst days in the hospital, a cold, calculating fury. How long have you known? Her voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of 8 years of deception. I suspected something was wrong about 2 years after you got married. I got up and walked to the kitchen, needing something to do with my hands. I put the kettle on for tea, another ritual Margaret and I had shared. Richard started asking me questions about your finances, about how much I was helping you. What kind of questions? Innocent ones at first. He would mention how grateful you both were for my help with the temporary expenses while he got established in his father's business. He always made it sound like it was just for a few months until the trust fund kicked in or until his salary increased. I brought 2 cups of tea to the table, the same mismatched set Margaret and I had used for decades. Nothing like the fine china Lillian served tea in now, china that I had indirectly paid for. But the months turned into years, and Richard kept finding reasons why the help needed to continue. His father's business was restructuring. The trust fund was tied up in legal issues. His salary was being reinvested in the company. Lillian wrapped her hands around the warm cup, staring into the pale brown liquid. When did you realize he was lying? About 3 years ago. I was at your house for Emma's 5th birthday party, and I overheard Harold on the phone in Richard's office. He was talking to someone about a new boat he had just bought, laughing about how he had gotten a great deal because the seller was desperate. I sat back down, the memory still bitter in my mouth. The boat cost $240,000, Lillian, more than I make in 4 years of retirement pension. He was bragging about paying cash for it. While you were sending us almost $8,000 a month? While I was eating peanut butter sandwiches for dinner and wearing the same 3 shirts to rotate through the week. She looked up at me sharply. Dad, you never told me you were struggling. What was I supposed to say? That I was working weekends at the hardware store to supplement my pension, that I hadn't bought new clothes in 3 years, that I was eating 1 meal a day some weeks to make sure there was enough money in the account for your mortgage? The cup trembled in her hands. You were starving yourself to pay for our life. I wasn't starving. That's dramatic. I was just being careful with money. Dad, you lost weight. I noticed it, but I thought you were just getting older. I had lost weight, 37 pounds over the past 3 years, enough that my clothes hung loose and Mrs. Chen had started bringing me extra portions of the soup she made. But I hadn't wanted Lillian to worry, and I certainly hadn't wanted her to feel guilty about money I had chosen to give her. The real revelation came about 6 months ago, I continued. I was at the house for James's kindergarten graduation, and Victoria pulled me aside for a private conversation. What did she say? She thanked me. The memory made my jaw clench. She actually thanked me for being so generous with my contributions to your household. Lillian set her cup down with a sharp clink. She knew the whole time. She knew everything, sweetheart. She knew I was paying the mortgage, the insurance, the school tuition. She knew because Richard had told them from the beginning. What else did she say? I took a deep breath, remembering the condescending smile on Victoria's perfectly made-up face. She said she admired my sacrifice, that not many fathers would be willing to support their daughter's family so completely. She said Richard was lucky to have married into such a generous family. Generous family? Lillian laughed, but there was no humor in it. She made it sound like I came with a dowry. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. She said she hoped I would continue to be understanding about the situation because Richard and their family had grown accustomed to the current arrangement. The current arrangement. Those were her exact words, like my life savings were just a business contract they had negotiated. Lillian stood up and began pacing again, her movements sharp and agitated. They played me for 8 years. 8 years of making me feel grateful, making me feel like I had married up, like I was lucky to be accepted into their family. There's more. She stopped pacing and turned to face me. How much more can there be? The day after Victoria's little speech, I decided to do some research. I went to the county courthouse and looked up property records, business filings, financial disclosure documents. I walked to the small desk in the corner where I kept important papers and pulled out a thick folder. Harold's construction business is worth over $4 million. Richard is listed as a full partner, not an employee. His salary last year was $187,000. $187,000. Lillian's voice was flat with shock. The family trust fund Victoria mentioned, the one that was supposedly tied up in legal issues, it's worth $2.3 million, and Richard has been receiving quarterly distributions of $45,000 for the past 4 years. I spread the documents across the table, official papers with official seals, that told the story of a family with more money than they could spend in a lifetime. They weren't helping you transition to financial independence, Lillian. They were using my money to subsidize their lifestyle while making you think you were dependent on their generosity. How? Her voice cracked. How does that even work? Every month, Richard takes money out of the family accounts. Money he tells his parents is going toward your household expenses, but instead of paying your bills, he puts that money into investments, luxury purchases, savings accounts. I pointed to one of the documents. 3 months ago, he bought $50,000 worth of stock. Last year, he purchased a $28,000 watch, all while I was paying your actual living expenses. He's been stealing from you. Not stealing exactly, more like money laundering, using my payments to free up his family's money for other things while telling you that their money was supporting you." Lillian sank back into her chair, her face pale. "The vacation to Tuscany last summer. Richard said it was a gift from his parents, a second honeymoon. Probably paid for with money he saved by not paying your mortgage that month. The children's ski lessons, Emma's dance classes, James's baseball equipment, everything Richard said was covered by the family budget. Everything Richard knew I was actually paying for." She buried her face in her hands. "I thanked him, Dad. I thanked him for being such a good provider. I told him how grateful I was that he took such good care of us. You had no way of knowing. I should have asked questions. I should have insisted on seeing the financial documents, on understanding how our life was being paid for. Richard made sure you didn't need to ask questions. He handled everything, kept you comfortable and ignorant, made you feel like finances were too complicated for you to understand. While they were all laughing at me behind my back. While they were all laughing at both of us. The foolish old man throwing away his retirement money and his naive daughter who never thought to look behind the curtain." Lillian looked up at me with tears streaming down her face. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for what I said at dinner, for believing their lies about you being lazy, for not seeing what you were sacrificing for us. You don't need to apologize for being manipulated by experts." "Yes, I do. Because somewhere inside I wanted to believe I deserved that life. I wanted to believe I had married someone successful, someone who could give me everything I never had growing up." "You deserve better than what you had growing up. Your mother and we did our best, but we couldn't give you the things Richard's family could. You gave me love. You gave me security. You gave me parents who sacrificed everything for my happiness." She reached across the table and gripped my hand. "Richard's family gave me lies wrapped in expensive paper. What are you going to do now?" "I don't know. I don't know anything anymore." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I can't go back to that house and pretend I don't know. I can't smile at Victoria and thank Harold for his generosity. I can't let my children grow up thinking their grandfather is a failure while their other grandfather is a success, when the truth is exactly the opposite. You don't have to decide everything today." "Yes, I do." Her voice was stronger now, more determined. "Because every day I stay in that house, every day I let them continue this charade, is another day you're paying for my ignorance." She gathered up the papers, folding them carefully and putting them back in my folder. "Dad, I need you to stop the payments." "Are you sure? Do you have a plan?" "Not yet, but I know I can't build a real life on a foundation of lies and stolen money." She stood up and kissed my forehead, the way Margaret used to do when she was proud of me. "It's time for me to grow up and face the truth about the life I've been living." As she walked to the door, I called after her. "Lillian, be careful. People like Richard's family don't give up control easily." "I know, Dad. But I'm not the same woman who married Richard 6 years ago. That woman was desperate and grateful for any security she could find." She turned back to me with a smile that reminded me powerfully of Margaret. "This woman is your daughter, and your daughter doesn't run from fights." After she left, I sat in my quiet apartment and thought about Margaret. She would have been proud of Lillian today, proud of the strength I had seen in her eyes. But she would have been furious with me for letting the deception go on so long. Tomorrow, Lillian would go home and confront the people who had been using both of us for 8 years. And I would be here, ready to help her pick up the pieces when her carefully constructed world finally collapsed completely. I didn't hear from Lillian for 4 days. 4 days during which I went through the motions of my quiet routine while feeling like I was holding my breath underwater. I knew she was back in that house, surrounded by people who had lied to her for 8 years, trying to figure out how to confront a truth that would destroy everything she thought she knew about her life. On Thursday evening, as I was washing dishes in my small kitchen sink, my phone rang. Not Lillian's number, Harold's. "Albert, we need to talk." His voice carried the same commanding tone he used when discussing business deals, like he was accustomed to people jumping when he called. "About what, Harold?" "I think you know exactly what. Richard told me about your conversation with Lillian, about the things you've been filling her head with." I dried my hands slowly, taking my time. Margaret always said the person who stays calm in a fight usually wins it. I haven't filled her head with anything except the truth. "The truth?" Harold laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The truth is that you've been enabling your daughter's dependency instead of teaching her to stand on her own feet. We've been trying to help her become independent." By lying to her about who pays for her life? By giving her the dignity of believing she was contributing to a partnership instead of being a charity case. The casual cruelty of his words hit me like a physical blow. Charity case. That's how he saw Lillian, how his entire family saw her. Not as Richard's wife, not as the mother of their grandchildren, but as someone they were doing a favor by allowing to exist in their orbit. "Harold, I'm going to hang up now." "Wait." His tone shifted, becoming more conciliatory. "Look, Albert, I understand you're upset, but think about what's best for everyone here. Lillian is happy, the children are thriving, Richard loves his family. Why destroy all of that over money? Because it's built on lies. All relationships involve some level of discretion about financial matters. Victoria doesn't need to know exactly how much I spend on my golf membership. Richard doesn't need to burden Lillian with complicated family business arrangements. This isn't a golf membership, Harold. This is 8 years of deception about who's supporting her family. And what good will it do anyone for her to know? Will it make her happier? Will it improve her children's lives? Or will it just salve your wounded pride?" That stung because there was a grain of truth in it. Part of me was angry about being dismissed as lazy and unsuccessful while unknowingly funding their lifestyle. But that wasn't why I had told Lillian the truth. She deserves to know reality from fantasy. Reality is that she has a beautiful home, healthy children, and a husband who adores her. Fantasy is thinking that destroying all of that will somehow make her life better. I was quiet for a moment, thinking about Lillian's face when she realized the extent of the deception, the pain, the betrayal, the way her whole world had shifted beneath her feet. "Harold, are you going to tell her the truth about Richard's finances?" "What truth? That he's successful? That our family is well established? She knows these things. That he makes $187,000 a year plus quarterly trust fund payments of $45,000, that your family is worth millions, that every penny I send could easily be covered by what he makes in 6 weeks. Silence on the other end of the line. "She's going to find out eventually," I continued. "The question is whether you want to tell her yourselves or have her discover it the way she discovered everything else. You're making a mistake, Albert. Lillian isn't as strong as you think she is. This kind of upheaval, this kind of financial uncertainty, it could destroy her. What could destroy her is learning that the people she trusted most have been lying to her face for 8 years. Think about the children, Albert. Think about Emma and James. Do you really want to put them through their parents' divorce? Do you want to take them away from the only stable home they've ever known?" And there it was, the threat I had been expecting. Harold wasn't just trying to protect his family's deception, he was threatening to make me the villain in whatever chaos followed. "I'm hanging up now, Harold. Albert, if you continue down this path, you'll lose your daughter and your grandchildren. Is your pride worth that?" I ended the call and sat down heavily in my recliner. Margaret's picture sat on the side table next to me, taken on our 20th wedding anniversary. She was laughing at something I had said, her eyes bright with joy and mischief. What would she tell me to do? The answer came to me immediately. She would tell me to protect our daughter, even if it meant protecting her from a comfortable lie. Margaret had never believed in sugarcoating reality. She had told Lillian about death when the goldfish died, about divorce when her friend's parents split up, about cancer when her own diagnosis came. Truth, even painful truth, was always better than beautiful lies. My phone buzzed with a text from Lillian. "Can you come to the house tomorrow at 2 p.m.? It's time." I stared at the message for a long time before responding, Are you sure you're ready for this? Her reply came immediately. No, but I'm doing it anyway. The next afternoon, I pulled into the circular driveway of the house I had been paying for without ever truly seeing. It was even more impressive in the daylight, sprawling, expensive, designed to intimidate, the kind of house that announced its owner's success to everyone who passed by. Lillian met me at the door, and I barely recognized her. She was dressed simply in jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back, no makeup. She looked younger somehow, more like the girl I remembered from before her first marriage fell apart. "They're all here," she said quietly. "Richard, Harold, Victoria. The children are at school." "How much do they know?" "Richard knows I found the financial documents. I told him I wanted to have a family meeting to discuss our household budget going forward." Her mouth curved in a bitter smile. "He thinks I want to renegotiate the terms of your support." I followed her through the marble foyer, past the expensive artwork and designer furniture that I now knew I had indirectly purchased. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was walking through a museum of my own financial sacrifice. The family was gathered in the living room, arranged like they were conducting a board meeting. Harold sat in the largest chair, Victoria perched beside him on the sofa, Richard standing by the fireplace with his arms crossed. They all looked up when I entered, and I saw calculation in their eyes, not concern. "Albert," Harold said, standing to shake my hand, "thank you for coming. I think we can work through this situation in a way that benefits everyone." I didn't shake his hand. Instead, I sat down in the chair Lillian indicated, directly across from the family that had been using my grief and love as a personal ATM for 8 years. "Lillian tells us there's been some confusion about the financial arrangements," Victoria said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "We want to make sure everyone understands how grateful we are for your temporary assistance during Richard's transition period." "Temporary assistance," I repeated. "Is that what we're calling 8 years now?" Richard cleared his throat. "Dad Albert, I want you to know how much I appreciate everything you've done for our family. It's been invaluable during these challenging economic times." Challenging economic times. I looked at Lillian, who was standing by the window with her back to us. "Richard, what was your salary last year?" "I don't see how that's relevant to this discussion." "Humor me." Harold leaned forward. "Albert, family financial information is private. I'm sure you understand." "Not when my family financial information has been funding your family lifestyle for almost a decade." I pulled out the folder of documents I had brought and set it on the coffee table between us. "Richard made $187,000 last year, plus quarterly trust fund distributions of $45,000. Harold's business is worth over $4 million. The family trust is worth $2.3 million. Victoria's composure slipped for just a moment. "How did you get access to private financial records?" "The same way any citizen can. Public records, business filings, tax documents. Amazing what you can find when you bother to look." Richard's face had gone pale. "Those numbers are misleading. There are expenses, business obligations, family responsibilities, like the $28,000 watch you bought last year or the $50,000 in stock purchases you made 3 months ago." Lillian turned from the window, and when she faced us, I saw Margaret's steel in her expression. "Stop," she said quietly. "Just stop lying." "Sweetheart," Victoria began, "you're upset, and that's understandable. But you're letting your father confuse you with numbers taken out of context." "The only thing I'm confused about," Lillian said, her voice growing stronger, "is how I lived with all of you for 6 years without realizing you thought I was stupid." "Nobody thinks you're stupid," Richard said, moving toward her. "You're my wife, the mother of my children. This is just a misunderstanding about financial arrangements." "Financial arrangements," Lillian laughed, and it was a sound I had never heard from her before. Sharp, knowing, dangerous. "Is that what you call taking $7,750 a month from my father while telling me it came from your family money?" Harold stood up abruptly. "Now wait just a minute. Nobody took anything from anybody. Your father offered assistance, and we graciously accepted it while working to establish Richard in the business." "For 8 years?" These things take time. Building generational wealth requires patience and long-term thinking. Building generational wealth, I said quietly, with my generational wealth, with the money my wife and I saved for 40 years, with the house where my daughter grew up, with the jewelry Margaret's grandmother passed down through 3 generations of women. The room went dead silent. You used my mother's jewelry? Lillian's voice was barely a whisper. Victoria recovered first. Lillian, darling, these are just emotional manipulations. Your father is trying to make you feel guilty for accepting help from people who love you. People who love me don't lie to me for 8 years. We didn't lie, Richard said desperately. We just simplified the financial arrangements so you wouldn't have to worry about complicated family business. Simplified. Lillian walked to the center of the room and I watched her transform before my eyes. The grateful, accommodating wife disappeared, replaced by someone I had never seen before but recognized immediately. This was Margaret's daughter. You simplified the fact that my father sold everything he owned to pay for our life, while you all laughed about what a generous, naive fool he was. That's not how it was, Harold protested. Then tell me how it was, Harold. Tell me about the boat you bought for $240,000 while my father was eating 1 meal a day to afford our mortgage payment. I felt something shift in the room, a subtle change in power dynamics. For 8 years, this family had controlled the narrative, controlled Lillian's understanding of her own life. Now she was taking that control back, and they didn't know how to handle it. Lillian, Victoria said carefully, you're obviously upset. Perhaps we should take some time to cool down and discuss this more rationally. I am being rational. For the first time in 8 years, I'm thinking clearly. She turned to face Richard directly. I want you to leave. What? Richard blinked in shock. I want you to pack your things and leave, tonight. Lillian, you're not thinking straight. This is our home, our life together. You can't just... This isn't our home, Richard. This is my father's home. He owns it, he pays for it, he's been supporting it while you've been lying to me about who you are and what you can provide. But the children, Victoria said, playing her final card. Think about Emma and James. Think about the stability they need. Lillian looked at me, and I saw the question in her eyes. This was the moment Harold had warned me about over the phone. The choice between comfortable lies and difficult truths, between the life I had given her and the life she would have to build for herself. Dad, she said quietly, will you help me figure out what comes next? Of course, sweetheart. Even if it means the children and I have to start over, even if we have to live differently, more simply. I thought about Margaret's recipe box sitting on my kitchen counter, about the meals we had shared at our scarred table, about the laughter that had filled our modest house on Maple Street. Real joy didn't require marble countertops. Especially then, I said. Lillian nodded and turned back to Richard's family. You have 1 hour to pack and leave, all of you. Lillian, you're making a terrible mistake, Harold said, his voice hard, now that persuasion had failed. You have no idea how to live without our support. You're right, she said calmly. I have no idea how to live without support. But I'm about to learn how to live without lies. As Richard's family filed out in stunned silence, I watched my daughter reclaim her life. It wouldn't be easy, it wouldn't be comfortable, but for the first time in 8 years it would be real. And that, Margaret would have told us both, was worth more than all the marble and crystal money could buy. 6 months later, I was standing in the kitchen of a modest 2-bedroom house on Elm Street, 3 blocks away from where Margaret and I had raised Lillian. The house was 60 years old, with creaky floors and windows that stuck when it rained, but it had something the mansion never possessed. It felt like home. Grandpa Albert, can you help me with this recipe? Emma asked, standing on a step stool beside me, flour dusting her dark hair. She was holding Margaret's recipe card for chocolate chip cookies, the paper yellowed with age and stained from decades of use. What's the problem, sweetheart? It says 1 cup of butter, but I don't know how to measure butter. I showed her how to pack the butter into the measuring cup, the same way Margaret had taught me 45 years ago, and the same way I had taught Lillian when she was Emma's age. These small rituals, passed down through generations, meant more than all the expensive toys and designer clothes Richard's family had provided. "Why do we make cookies from scratch when we could just buy them?" James asked from his seat at the kitchen table, where he was supposedly doing homework but actually watching us cook. "Because homemade cookies taste like love," I said, repeating something Margaret used to say. "Store-bought cookies just taste like sugar." Through the kitchen window, I could see Lillian in the small backyard, hanging laundry on a line strung between two oak trees. She was wearing jeans and an old sweater, her hair tied back with a rubber band, and she was humming something under her breath. I hadn't heard her hum in years. The divorce had been finalized 3 months ago. Richard had fought it initially, claiming Lillian was having some kind of breakdown, but when she presented evidence of his family's 8-year deception, his lawyer had advised him to settle quickly and quietly. The custody arrangement gave Lillian primary custody, with Richard having visitation every other weekend. Visits that took place at his parents' estate, since he had moved back in with Harold and Victoria after the separation. The financial settlement had been complicated. Since the house was in my name and I had been paying all the expenses, there was very little marital property to divide. Richard kept his trust fund and his position in his father's business. Lillian kept her self-respect and her relationship with me. "Dad, can you set the table?" Lillian called through the screen door. "Dinner's almost ready." We were having pot roast, made in the same slow cooker Margaret and I had used for 20 years. Nothing fancy. Nothing that required special ingredients or complicated techniques. Just good food made with care, shared around a table where everyone belonged. The kitchen table came from a second-hand furniture store, solid wood with mismatched chairs. Lillian and the children had painted different colors during a weekend project. It wasn't elegant, but it was sturdy and real, a place where we could gather without pretense or performance. "Can we light the candles?" Emma asked, pointing to the simple white candles in plain glass holders that Lillian had placed in the center of the table. "Of course." As I lit the candles, I thought about all the elaborate dinner parties I had attended at the mansion, with crystal glasses and silver flatware and conversations that felt more like negotiations than family discussions. This simple meal in this modest house with my daughter and grandchildren who finally knew the truth about their lives felt like a celebration. Lillian came inside, bringing the scent of autumn air and laundry soap. She had put on a little weight since the divorce. Color had returned to her cheeks, and the tension that had lived in her shoulders for years had finally disappeared. "How was work today?" I asked as we settled around the table. "Good. Busy." She had taken a job at a local real estate office, working as an assistant while she studied for her license. The pay wasn't much, but it was honest work that belonged entirely to her. "I think I'm going to pass the exam next month." "Of course you will. You've always been smart about everything except men." Emma giggled. "Grandpa Albert, you're not supposed to say things like that." "Your grandfather is allowed to speak the truth in his own house," Lillian said, smiling, "even when the truth is inconvenient." The truth. It had become our family motto over the past 6 months. No more polite lies, no more convenient omissions, no more protecting each other from reality. It was sometimes uncomfortable, but it was clean. "Speaking of truth," I said, reaching into my pocket, "I have something for you." I pulled out a small jewelry box, worn velvet with a tarnished clasp. Inside, nestled in faded silk, was Margaret's locket, the one I had kept when I sold everything else. Lillian's eyes filled with tears. "Dad, you don't have to—" "Yes, I do. This was meant to be yours. Your mother always intended for you to have it." She lifted the locket from the box with trembling fingers, opening it to reveal the tiny photographs inside, Margaret as a young woman, baby Lillian in her christening dress. "I remember when Mom showed me this," she whispered. "She said someday I would understand why she wore it every day." "And do you understand now?" Lillian fastened the chain around her neck, the locket settling just below her collarbone where Margaret's had rested for 26 years. She wore it because love isn't about what you can buy or what you can provide. It's about choosing to stay, choosing to sacrifice, choosing to put someone else's happiness before your own comfort. Smart girl, just like your mother. Can I see? Emma asked, leaning over to examine the locket. Who are the people in the pictures? That's your grandmother Margaret when she was young, Lillian said, showing her daughter the tiny faces. And that's me when I was a baby, about the same age James was when you first met him. She's pretty, Emma said seriously. She looks like you, Mama. I hope so, sweetheart. As we ate our simple dinner, the conversation flowed naturally between homework and weekend plans and Emma's upcoming dance recital. Normal family topics discussed without the undercurrent of tension and performance that had characterized meals at the mansion. Grandpa Albert, James said, pushing peas around his plate. Why don't we live in the big house anymore? It was a question he had asked several times since the move, and each time Lillian and I tried to give him an age-appropriate explanation about how sometimes families need to make changes, how bigger isn't always better, how what matters most is being together and being honest with each other. Do you miss it? I asked him. James considered this seriously, the way 6-year-olds do when they're really thinking about something. I miss my big bedroom and the pool. But I like eating dinner with you every night better than having a pool. Why's that? Because when we lived in the big house, everyone was always busy or angry or talking about grown-up things I didn't understand. Here, we just talk about regular stuff and laugh and make cookies. Out of the mouths of babes. The mansion had provided luxury, but this house provided something far more valuable: presence. Real attention, real conversation, real connection. After dinner, while Lillian helped the children with homework at the kitchen table, I sat in my recliner in the living room. The same ugly brown corduroy chair that had moved with me from the big house to the apartment to this new home. It was threadbare and patched, but it was mine, earned through years of honest work. The living room was small, furnished with a mix of second-hand finds and things salvaged from my apartment. Nothing matched, nothing was expensive, but everything belonged to us. On the mantel above the small fireplace sat photographs: Margaret and me on our wedding day, Lillian's high school graduation, Emma's first steps, James's kindergarten picture. Real moments, not posed perfection. My phone buzzed with a text message. Richard, can I pick up the kids an hour early on Friday? Family dinner at my parents'. I showed the message to Lillian, who was helping Emma with multiplication tables. What do you think? She asked. It's your decision. They're your children. She thought for a moment, then typed back. That's fine, but they'll need to be back by 8 p.m. for Emma's bedtime routine. No drama, no fighting, no using the children as weapons, just practical co-parenting with a man who was, for better or worse, still their father. Richard had been surprisingly gracious about the divorce once the initial shock wore off. I suspected his parents had advised him that a quiet settlement was better than a public exposure of their years of deception. Do you ever regret it? I asked Lillian after the children had gone to bed, and we were sitting on the front porch, sharing a cup of tea and watching the stars appear in the clear October sky. Regret what? The divorce? Moving out of the mansion? Finding out the truth? All of it. Your life is much harder now. You work full-time, worry about money, have to make decisions you never had to think about before. She was quiet for a long time, rocking gently in the wooden chair I had found at a yard sale and repaired myself. Dad, do you remember what it was like when Mom was sick? Those last few months when we knew the cancer was winning? Of course. Do you remember what she said about pain? About how physical pain was easier to bear than living a lie? I did remember. Margaret had refused the strongest pain medications because they made her confused, disconnected from reality. She said she would rather face death with clear eyes than live in comfortable delusion. She said the truth might hurt, but lies would kill you slowly from the inside. Lillian continued. I was dying slowly in that house, Dad. I was disappearing into someone else's idea of who I should be, someone grateful and decorative and ignorant. And now I know who I am. I'm a woman who works hard for what she has, who raises her children with honesty, who doesn't accept charity disguised as love. She reached over and took my hand. I'm your daughter, and Margaret's daughter, and that's something to be proud of. We sat in comfortable silence, watching Mrs. Patterson across the street tend to her flower garden under the porch light. This neighborhood was full of people like us. Working families, retirees, single mothers, elderly couples who had built their lives on love and labor rather than inheritance and privilege. Dad, there's something I want to tell you. What's that? I've been saving money. From my job, from cutting expenses, from being careful with every dollar. She pulled an envelope from her pocket. It's not much yet, but it's a start. Inside the envelope were $2,700 in cash and a handwritten note. Payment 1 toward a debt that can never be fully repaid, but will be honored for the rest of my life. Thank you for sacrificing everything so I could learn the difference between what I wanted and what I needed. Your grateful daughter. I tried to hand the envelope back to her, but she wouldn't take it. Lillian, you don't owe me anything. Everything I did because I love you. I know that. And everything I'm doing now, I'm doing because I love you too. Because you deserve to have someone take care of you for once, instead of always being the one who takes care of everyone else. I thought about Margaret, about how proud she would be of both of us in this moment. Her daughter, strong and independent and honest. Her husband finally allowing himself to be loved in return. There's something else, Lillian said. I've been thinking about Thanksgiving, about starting some new traditions. What kind of traditions? The kind where we make dinner together, where the children learn your stories and Margaret's recipes, where we give thanks for what we actually have instead of what we think we deserve. I looked at this house, small and imperfect and real. I thought about my daughter, working hard and building a life based on truth instead of comfortable lies. I thought about my grandchildren, learning that love means presence, not presents. I think your mother would like that very much, I said. As we prepared to go inside, Lillian stopped and looked back at me. Dad, do you know what the best part is about living here? What's that? When I wake up in the morning, I know exactly where I am, how I got here, and who I am. For the first time in 8 years, I'm not confused about my own life. Inside the house, I checked on Emma and James, both sleeping peacefully in their small shared bedroom. Their toys were second-hand, their clothes came from discount stores, and their lives were infinitely richer than they had been in the mansion. Before I turned out the light, I whispered the same prayer Margaret and I had said over Lillian's bed when she was small. Thank you for this child, for this day, for this love that costs everything and is worth even more. In my own small bedroom, I placed the envelope from Lillian on my dresser next to Margaret's picture. $2,700. A fraction of what I had spent over 8 years, but it represented something far more valuable than money. It represented my daughter's freedom, her self-respect, her understanding that love isn't something you buy or something you're grateful for. It's something you give and receive with equal dignity. For the first time since Margaret died, I fell asleep without worrying about anyone else's happiness, but my own. And my happiness, I had finally learned, came not from what I could provide for others, but from who I could be with the people I loved. The sacrifice had been silent for 8 years. But the liberation was everything Margaret had taught me love should be, honest, present, and absolutely free.